I was brought up on land that had a medium-sized ráth, or hill fort, as they are known in this part of the world. The ráth symbolised much in my childhood and had an important feel to it that stretched way beyond the separate elements of its makeup. A few large beech trees planted in a circle around a single embankment. First of all, it was up the hill away from us. Going to the ráth almost felt like a childish pilgrimage if I'd had words for that at that time. But I knew for sure in my childish heart that was part of the sacred, the unexplainable. There was an air of mystery and wonder to it. To me, it was more spiritual and more moving than any church I knew. After the short climb to get there was just the one way in. Actually, there were many ways in, but somehow this was the way we always went in. And it also felt like bad luck to enter any other way. It was the childish portal to another world. Immediately, the day was transformed from perhaps a hot summer's day into a cool, dreamy, green experience, almost like diving underwater. So different was the contrast between the internal ráth, world of large trees, secrets and unknowing, and the sense of being enclosed and safe. In contrast to that other world we had just come from, it almost felt like coming home, like I had been here before. There was a familiarity to it, and yet a strangeness. We always headed for the old building that was at the back edge from the entrance, a simple stone hut with 2 stone benches lining either side, enough to seat 4 people at a squeeze. There was a hole in the stone roof through which you could watch the waving branches of the towering trees above and dream of different times, of a people long since disappeared, but who left this tangible, real evidence of their presence to allow a child like me to dream centuries later. We kids growing up knew it intimately, and it provided much for the childish imagination to dwell on. Firstly, there was always the fairies, the wee folk. You had to make sure that you did not upset or disturb them in any way. So you looked after the ráth when you were in, making sure to leave everything the way you got it. No moving of dead branches, no bringing in other stuff into the area, no taking stuff away from the ráth, or the fairies would come and get you. To a child, it was all deliciously scary, yet at the same time irresistible. When we were a bit older, we often camped outside in the nearby fields, but even considerably older brothers were somehow afraid to camp in the ráth itself, no matter how much they were dared to by my father. There were other beings in the ráth also. Halfway up the face of one of the beech trees was a hole where jackdaws nested for years. We could climb up on each other's shoulders to look in and see them. They were noisy and smelly to us small human beings. If you've never smelled a jackdaw, you'll never forget it. Once I put my arm in to pet the baby jackdaw and got a violent peck on the finger. Withdrawing quickly, I bruised my elbow against the hard edge of the tree. Lesson well learnt. There were bunches of nettles and cowpaths, old branches and rotting wood, and different fungi. We called them mushrooms, though we dared not eat them. We only knew one mushroom as kids, and that was the field mushroom, and they didn't grow in the ráth. Once, an older brother, home from his first year in college, decided that it was worth making an archaeological dig in it to find so-called buried treasure. Much to the amusement of my father, he spent days up there digging, never finding anything except maybe himself. That ráth, the memories of it, and what it meant to one small child because of the mystery of it, built at a time before the commons was enclosed to protect the cattle or a small community who might have lived in the area. A place they would have called home, a place to meet, to be in community, to feel safe. About 15 years ago, I was devastated when I heard that this ráth had been levelled by a so-called progressive farmer. Interestingly, he never had any luck out of that place. His partner left him shortly afterwards. As to say around these parts, you don't mess with the fairies. So why am I talking about all this, and what's this got to do with Mass Rocks? As you might imagine, the Mass Rock on Crockanboy Hill is much on my mind these days. Now, I've only been there a couple of times, yet it touched me deeply. It's that transient, ephemeral feeling one gets in the presence of living history and sacred place. You can feel the ancestors are there, stretching way back, generation after generation. The child in me imagining having to walk up this mountain in bare feet with inadequate clothes to attend Mass, feeling the fear of being caught as the cold wind and rain blows across the uplands, knowing that when everything else has been taken, that the only thing that cannot be taken is your belief, feeling the struggle even to hold on to that. The Mass Rock and the Ráth could not be more different. The Ráth sited on the rich grasslands near the Curragh of Kildare, the Mass Rock on the uplands of the high Sperrins in Tyrone. Yet the two mark the passage of us human beings. The Mass Rock allowing community to have a sense of place and safety to worship, the Ráth offering a sense of safety to the community against marauding cattle raids. One site visited regularly for worship, the more and more permanent former residents, or maybe a summer bully for cattle, both stretching back into hard, difficult times where to thrive, first one had to survive. Coming back to today, the march of corporate colonialism, in my opinion, closely parallels that of British colonialism. The latter exercised power by control of access of land, who could gather there, worship and practice their culture. This culminating in the penal era, forcing Catholics out of conventional places of worship and onto mountainsides and remote locations such as Crockanboy Mass Rock. A corporation such as Dalradian acquires legal control over land and then determines who may or may not access culturally significant places. So the question is, should ownership confer the right to interrupt a long-standing cultural relationship between a community and a heritage site? British colonialism often reduced landscapes to legal property and economic assets, and the local meanings attached to places then became subordinate. Under corporate colonialism, land becomes a mere development asset and heritage is acknowledged only insofar as it can be accommodated within the commercial objectives. Crockanboy is a living heritage site whose significance derives from continued community access and cultural practice. I ask you, what gives a corporation any right to restrict or remove this heritage? A corporation whose only entity is on paper. These places belong to the collective memory of community rather than to any individual owner. The Ráth of my childhood was experienced as part of a shared inheritance, regardless of legal title. One of the legacies of British colonialism was the old commons were enclosed, and places that once belonged to everyone came under control of a few. People still carried the stories, memories and sense of belonging, but they no longer had the freedom they once had access to these places. The closure of access to the Crockanboy Mass Rock represents a modern form of enclosure in which a place of shared cultural and spiritual significance is transformed into a space governed by the logic of corporate colonialism rather than community stewardship. One of the things that strikes me when thinking about the history of colonialism is that it was often not just about taking land, it was also about deciding what mattered and what did not. Places that had deep meaning for local people were often seen very differently by those who held power. That leaves us with a simple question when it comes to the Mass Rock. Who gets to decide what this place means? Is it the community that has carried its stories, memories and significance from one generation to the next, or is the corporation that now owns the land around it? The Mass Rock did not survive because it was recorded on a map or protected by legislation. It survived because people kept going there. They carried its memory. They told its stories. They walked the old paths. They remembered the generations who came before them, and in doing so, passed something on to those who came after. Under British rule, communities often held on to their culture and their faith by holding on to places like this, even when access was restricted or discouraged. The connection between people and place was what allowed traditions to survive. That's why I find the idea of corporate colonialism so troubling. A corporation may leave the Mass Rock exactly where it is. The stone itself may remain untouched, yet if access is restricted and the connection between people and place is broken, there will be left that feeling that I had on the day I heard the Ráth of my childhood had been destroyed. A site may survive physically while being destroyed culturally. The real significance of the Mass Rock is not the rock itself. It lies in the remembering, the gathering, the walking, the storytelling, the sense of connection with those who came before us. Once these things are interrupted, the site risks become little more than an archaeological feature rather than a living part of our heritage. It is a living heritage that has survived for generations because people remain connected to it. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you all soon.